Good morning, Blue Jay friends, and thanks for being here. This is Blue Jays vs. Them, and I'm your host, Jerry Schwannard. If you're new, welcome. I hope you'll stick around and become a regular listener. I also don't want to forget about my regular listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in or clicking on whatever the term is. The Jays and the rest of the baseball world have finished with spring training. Today is the day. It's opening day, folks. The day when 29 teams will have delusions of grandeur and one team will start their journey on the way to be crowned World Series champions. Now, I'm not saying it's the Blue Jays. Of course, I'm not saying it isn't either. My 2023 predictions are coming up a little bit later on. I do want to take a moment here and reflect on the journey of this podcast to this point. You see, when the idea was given to me by my Podcast Addict subscriber, it was before I retired. There was a lot of work getting to where I am now, and I'm only getting started on this journey. Figuring out what format the podcast would be, naming it, setting up a domain name and website, how to get listed with the podcast providers. Then there was the equipment, mic, microphone stand, and recording software. Luckily enough, my family supported me. They threw me a retirement party at, get this, a private box at Rogers Center. It would have been even cooler if there was a game on. Just kidding. There was a game on. The Jays played the Sox that day. You can look up the score for October 1st, 2022. The point was that as a retirement present, they gave me a microphone and a gift card to help me buy whatever else I might need. Long story short, ever since I began planning this podcast, my initial plan was to begin right here on opening day. Well, my domain host had other plans and I needed to publish a recording to put on the site. And from there I decided to start doing episodes along with spring training. But it was this moment right here that I dreamt of and how I saw the podcast. For all of you who have endured listening to my early episodes, thank you so much. Now, let's get started, shall we? Normally, I'd mention the website and ask you to leave questions and comments there, so let's get it out of the way. In case you didn't know already, the website is www.bluejaysversusthem.ca. That's bluejaysvsthem.ca. You can also find my social media links on the website. Okay, here are a few things we'll cover in this week's episode. We'll recap spring training episode number 6, the Blue Jays score and the record from the final week of spring training, the Blue Jays Care Foundation's 50-50 draw, new CBA and a new balanced schedule, so we'll go over that. A new segment I'll call Blue Jays History, the opening weekend versus the St. Louis Cardinals, and next week versus the Royals, my season predictions, and some closing remarks. So, let's get on with the episode. Last episode came in just over 16 minutes. I did cut out my 2023 season predictions, so that's why they're in here now, although I think it'll be a lot more fitting in this episode. Over the past few episodes, this is where I put in a segment for baseball stats. At least for now, we'll take a break from that segment. Let's get on with the scores from the final week of spring training. Last week, the Blue Jays were in Fort Myers to face the Minnesota Twins and managed to extract a measure of payback for their 7-0 loss in Dunedin a week earlier. In Kikuchi's last start of the spring, he set the table and pitched 5 scoreless innings, striking out 9 batters and only allowing 1 free pass. Zach Thompson got the hold, allowing only 1 hit in 1 2/3 innings, striking out 3. Nate Pearson had a nice performance. He came in to close the 8th, and although he did walk 1 batter, all 4 of his recorded outs were on the strikeout. The only scores came in the 3rd and the 5th innings. In the 3rd, Spencer Horwitz singled and scored Danny Jensen from 3rd, or Elvis Martinez's single scored Otto Lopez for the inning's 2nd run. In the 5th, Horwitz, once again with his 2nd RBI, hit a sac fly to center, scoring Danny Jensen. The final score, Toronto 3 runs on 8 hits with no errors. The Twins had no runs on 4 hits with 2 errors. Their first meeting of the regular season will come May 26th when the Blue Jays go to Target Field in Minnesota for a weekend series. Last Friday, the Jays hosted the Phillies for a 6 o'clock game. They not only announced their opening day starter, in case you didn't know already, will be Alek Manoah, who also started the game. They also announced a complete 5-man rotation, but I'll get into that a little bit later. The Jays' batting lineup against the Phillies looked a lot like what we'll probably get on opening day, with Springer in right and leading off, batting second and at shortstop, Bo Bichette, Vladdy at first, batting third, the designated hitter Brandon Belt batting cleanup, followed by Kirk behind the plate. Varsho was in left, batting sixth, third baseman Matt Chapman batting seventh, and rounding out the last two were Whit Merrifield and Kevin Kiermaier at second and center field. Manoah pitched 6 innings, allowing 3 hits, 1 run, and striking out 6 batters. Dalton Varsho went 2 for 2 with a walk and an RBI triple. He also started a perfect relay to Matt Chapman, who threw to Kirk in time to get the 3rd out at the plate. The final score, Philadelphia 3 runs on 8 hits, no errors. The Blue Jays had 6 runs on 10 hits with 3 late inning errors. On Saturday, the Jays hosted the Tigers for the final time before the regular season. Sam Reverse got the start and looked pretty good for the first 2 innings, but he got into a little bit of trouble in the 3rd. A rare throwing error by Matt Chapman allowed the first runner to get on, followed by a hit by pitch. Jake Roberts' double provided the first run of the game. Parker Meadows then hit a 3-run homer to give the Tigers a 4-0 lead. After a 2-out single in the 8th by Bo Bichette, the Tigers' pitching fell off the rails, walking the bases loaded and walking Otto Lopez to score the Jays' only run. Their pitching didn't improve much in the 9th. The first 2 batters were given free passes. Glenn Santiago then ground into a double play, leaving the runner at 3rd. The next 2 batters also walked, loading the bases. Robinson Cano's younger brother, Gregory, ground into a force out at 2nd and ending the ballgame. The final score was Detroit 4 runs on 8 hits with no errors. The Blue Jays had 1 run on 3 hits with just the 1 error. The next time the Jays play Detroit will be for our home opener on April 11th. Sunday, the Jays went to George Steinbrenner Field for the last meeting with the Yankees until the Jays traveled to the Bronx for their weekend series at Yankee Stadium on the 21st of April. Pitching prospect Bowden Francis got the start, pitching 4 1/3, allowing 1 run on 4 hits, walking 3 and striking out 4. Zach Pop came in from the bullpen in the 5th after Francis allowed his 1 walk. He didn't have his best outing. Aaron Judge hit a 2-run homer to center, and Anthony Rizzo followed with a homer in the next at-bat for a 3-run inning. Toronto only managed 1 run in the 7th and another in the top of the 9th. The final score, Toronto 2 runs off 4 hits with no errors. The Yankees 6 runs off 10 hits with no errors. On Monday, the Jays played their final game in Dunedin for the spring against the Phillies. Chris Bassett got the start, going 4 2/3. He allowed 4 runs on 8 hits, including a 2-run homer. He also struck out 4. Trevor Richards had a good outing, going 2 1/3, striking out 5 batters with no walks. Romero came in the 9th for a non-save opportunity. He struck out 3 batters, but not before giving up a solo home run. Blue Jay batters managed to get 7 hits, including a triple by Nathan Lukes and a double by Kevin Kiermaier. Unfortunately, they only scored 2 runs. The play of the day belonged to home plate umpire Randy Rosenberg, who ejected Phillies catcher JT Realmuto for seemingly showing him up. Yeah, Randy, you did that all on your own. The final score, Philadelphia 5 runs on 9 hits with no errors. The Blue Jays scored 2 runs off their 7 hits with no errors. And finally on Tuesday, the Jays wrapped up their spring training at Baycare Park to face the Phillies for the 8th and final time. Jose Barrios got the start, pitching 4 2/3, allowing 4 runs on 3 hits. He walked 3 batters and struck out 4. Toronto scored 2 runs in the first on a 2-out bases-loaded single by Brandon Belt and 2 runs in the second off a home run by Bo Bichette. They scored 1 more run in the 7th, but it wasn't enough. The final score, Toronto scored 5 runs on 8 hits and 2 errors. Phillies had 6 runs on 8 hits with no errors. The next time the Jays see the Phillies will be at Citizens Bank Park on May 9th for a 2-game series. The Blue Jays went 17-15-1 during spring training. They were 10-5-1 in Dunedin with a 7-10 record on the road. I don't intend to talk a lot about this, but it is, in my opinion, a worthy cause. The Blue Jays 50-50 draw is much like last year's, with a growing jackpot and a daily or early bird prizes. I'll leave a link in the description of this episode on my website, or you can find it on the At the Ballpark app about the 50-50 draw itself. What I intend to do is, of course, remind everyone to buy tickets, and I'll announce winning numbers that are available at the time of the recording each week. If you've looked at the season schedule, you may have noticed that it isn't quite like the past few seasons. Let me break some of the changes down for you. In previous years, teams would play 19 games against divisional rivals. That's 76 games in total. Then they would play between 6 and 7 games each against teams outside of their division. Using last season's schedule, we played 7 games against all but one of the Central Division teams. We played 6 games against 3 of the teams in the AL West and 7 games against the other 2, for an additional 66 games, leaving only 20 games for interleague play. This has been the biggest mess. Not enough games to play a 3-game series against each team or even a 2-game series. So, it's been a rotating schedule of divisionary matches. One season East versus East, the next East versus Central, and then finally East versus West. Only 3 games each, and that's 15 games. Again, using last year as an example, the Jays played 4 out of 5 Central teams 3 times and then won 4 times in a 2-2 home-and-home series. That still leaves you with 4 games. Well, that's where our natural rival games come in. We played our natural rival, the Phillies, in another 2-game home-and-home series. Okay, what happens when your division rotation is against the same division as your natural rival? Well, in the past we played 4 games outside of the NL East. There's also a problem of facing 14 teams, only 3 games every 3 years, and having them in your ballpark every 6 years. Starting with this season, every team will play at least a 3-game series against every other team. Here's the breakdown. Interleague play, as it has been since each league has 15 teams, will happen all season long. Every team will play each team in the other league for 1 3-game series, except for the natural rival, in our case that's Philadelphia. That remains a 2 home and 2 away series. For the other 14 teams, whoever plays their games at home will play on the road next year, etc. This will take 46 games of the season, leaving 116 games for league play. The Blue Jays will play 6 games, 3 home and 3 away against 3 teams in the Central and 3 teams in the West, and 7 games against the other 2 teams in both those divisions. That's 64 games outside of the division, combined with the 46 interleague games, leaving only 52 games for divisional rivals. So we will now play only 13 games against divisional rivals. Well, if you have any questions or comments, you can see me after class. This does open the door for an imbalance of home and away games. The Blue Jays have played a total of 7,228 games since their first game on April 7th, 1977. And if life were fair, they would have played 3,614 of them at home and 3,614 of them on the road. Nope, they have played 8 more games on the road than they have at the various homes, from Exhibition Stadium to Skydome, now Rogers Center, and even the COVID homes of Salem Field in Buffalo and TD Ballpark in Dunedin. Heck, even the games we played in other ballparks as a home team. All of them included added up only to 3,610 games. Well, you might think to yourself, well, that's only 4 games out of over 7,000. That's not bad. Okay, sure. But do you think MLB wouldn't find a way to even it out if we had a surplus of home games? I think not. So, where did we lose our 4 home games? Well, over the course of the season, we'll explore the answers together. For now, let's talk about what we came here to talk about, and that's the regular season. The Blue Jays 2023 season will start in St. Louis for 3 games starting today at 4 p.m. Eastern. As mentioned before, the opening day starter today is Alek Manoah. The 2 teams will have a day off tomorrow and play Saturday and Sunday. Both games will be at 2 p.m. Eastern. Okay, going forward, just assume the times are Eastern. I'm not going to keep saying they're Eastern times. On Saturday, Kevin Gausman is expected to get the start, and Chris Bassett will make his Blue Jays regular season debut on Sunday. In our history of head-to-head matches, we've only played the Cardinals 22 times, to a slightly losing record of 10 wins and 12 losses. Our record all-time at Busch Stadium is 5-6. The tiebreaker, if you will, came in 2027 when they took 2 out of 3 from us. Last season, we played 2 home and 2 away, splitting each 2-game series. We played an even number of games between home and away, well, until this season, of course. So, for predictions in the series, most have the Cardinals finishing top of the NL Central, so they're expected to be a good team. Taking that and our history into consideration, I'd say we start the season with a 1-2 record in St. Louis. However, I think we can take 2 out of 3 games going into Kansas City with a 2-1 record. A return home for Whit Merrifield. The Blue Jays will be facing the Royals for 4 games starting on Monday. Projecting our starting 5 of the rotation, Game 1 should start Jose Barrios, followed by Yusei Kikuchi on Tuesday. Then back to Manoah on Wednesday and Gausman on Thursday. With a significantly longer history than with the Cards, we faced the Royals a total of 419 times for a win percentage of .525 or 21 games above 500. Is it a coincidence that we've played fewer games in Kansas than we have in Toronto? Only 208 games were played in Kansas City to the 211 games played in Toronto. Going back only to 2017, we have a slight edge in the win column at Kauffman Stadium with a 9-8 record. And last season, taking 2 of the 3 games there and 5-7 of the games overall. Kansas City does not project to be a top team, so taking 3 out of 4 games should be expected. Given recent history and team expectations, this leads me to my season predictions. Last week, I deferred my season predictions to this week, so here we go. Using a similar analysis as I used of the histories between St. Louis and the Royals, I went over Toronto's schedule and each series over the entire season. Over the course of this season, I'll give a similar breakdown for each series as I did for this week's episode. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's go over the rest of the league first, starting with the National League West. I didn't do an in-depth analysis of each team. I simply didn't have the data or the time to put that kind of thing together. What I did do is look at what a few of the experts said, along with how the teams performed in recent years. In fifth, I see the Colorado Rockies, followed by the Arizona Diamondbacks in fourth. The Giants have been fighting for the top spot with the Dodgers over the past few seasons, but I'm going to place them in third, right behind the Dodgers in second. That leaves the San Diego Padres to finish atop of the NL West. Moving on to the NL Central. This might be the weakest division in all of baseball, and finishing in the bottom will be the Cincinnati Reds. And no, I don't see the Blue Jays trading for Joey Votto. I'd be shocked if that happens. Fourth, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Here's where the real battle starts. Each of the remaining teams has a legit chance at first, but in my opinion, the Cubs will fall to third with the Cardinals failing to take the division from the Milwaukee Brewers. The Cardinals should make the playoffs with a second wildcard spot. The NL East, like the NL Central, the top three teams do have a legitimate shot at first. The bottom, however, are pretty straightforward. The Washington Nationals will finish last with the Miami Marlins sitting in fourth. Even though the Phillies went all the way to the World Series last year, I see them finishing in third, but will once again make the playoffs as a third wildcard. The New York Mets will hold the first wildcard spot, finishing just behind the Atlanta Braves for the top spot in the division. I don't think there's any argument that has the Oakland Athletics finishing anywhere but last place in the AL West. The next four did have some debate, but I went with the Rangers finishing in fourth and the Angels in third. Most have picked the Astros to finish first overall, and I'll agree with that, leaving the Seattle Mariners to finish in second and return to the playoffs as the second wildcard. Again, not as strong as the other two divisions in the American League, but some separation between the top three teams and the bottom two. I'll put the Kansas City Royals finishing last, and although I could have just as easily seen the Detroit Tigers there as well, I placed them in fourth. The White Sox, like their crosstown rivals, should finish third, leaving the battle for first between the Twins and the Guardians. The edge goes to the Guardians, once again finishing top of the AL Central and the third division. The toughest and deepest division in baseball is the American League East. Like the Central, there could be a fight to see who finishes in fifth. Sorry, Red Sox fans, the fifth spot will be yours once again. Baltimore made some gains from 2 years ago, but they're not quite ready to be considered a playoff team just yet, and may even take a step backwards, but not as far as the Sox. That leaves the Rays, the Jays, and the Yankees. While most experts have given the Yankees the keys to the division, with the Blue Jays in second. That leaves the Tampa Bay Rays in third, but will make the playoffs as the third wildcard team. As for the Yankees and the Jays, well, I'm not most experts. As I mentioned earlier, I went over each series for the Jays, and no, I didn't do the same for anyone else. I can legit see the Jays finishing with a 103-59 record. Of course, that all depends on health and performances living up to expectations, with career averages from Jose Barrios and a bounce-back season from Kikuchi, who had a great preseason. With that said, I also don't see the Yankees outperforming as they did last year. Aaron Judge won't carry them on his back and slug balls out of the park at the same pace he did last season. They'll finish in second with the first wildcard spot for the postseason. Before I go into my postseason predictions, I want to share with you a postseason betting odds to win the World Series from MGM. I am not a betting expert, and my understanding is that the betting line is based on a $100 bet. So, if the betting line says plus 200, that means you'll win 200 on your bet. Listeners, please correct me if I'm wrong. The odds makers at MGM, and I only picked this one because it happened to be one I came across and saved to my phone. They have the Astros favored to repeat at plus 600, followed by the Braves at plus 750. The Yankees and Dodgers are tied at plus 800, and the Mets and Padres follow at plus 900. Then there's a bit of a jump to plus 1200 for the Blue Jays. The Phillies have a plus 1600, while the Mariners have a plus 1800. St. Louis and Tampa both have a plus 2000, and the Guardians have a plus 2500. To put things into perspective, the bottom two teams, or the teams with the two highest odds, are at 50,000, those being the Nationals and the Athletics. The road to the World Series. In the National League, the Mets will host the Cardinals in the Wild Card Series, and they'll go on to meet the top-seeded Padres for the Division Series. In the other Wild Card Series, the Phillies will be in Milwaukee to face the Brewers. The Phillies will go on to face the second-seeded Braves in the other Division Series. In the American League Wild Card Series, New York will face the Mariners and move on to face the top-seeded Astros for the first Division Series. The third division winning Guardians will once again defeat the Tampa Bay Rays in their wildcard series and play the second division series against the Toronto Blue Jays. In the division series, the Mets will fall to the Padres and the Phillies will beat out the Braves, although I can see the Braves winning just as easily. The Yankees will once again fall to the Astros and Toronto will beat the Astros in the ALCS. The Padres will beat the Phillies and face the Blue Jays in the World Series. Yes, I have Toronto winning their first World Series in 30 years. So now might be a good time to put down that bet at plus 1200. I'm not sure if those odds are still accurate, and they will change throughout the season. Also, I'm not advocating gambling, and recommend that if you do gamble, that you do so within your means. And I strongly urge reading the online booking site's page on responsible gambling. That should do it for this, the first episode of the regular season, an episode that is closer to what I had originally conceived of in my head. There was a lot to go over in this episode, that of course won't be included in future episodes. As we get further into the seasons, it will get more defined and refined. For our next episode, we'll recap this episode, we'll look at the first week of the season for the Blue Jays versus St. Louis and Kansas City, the 50-50 draw. We'll journey through the seasons to find out where our missing home games went, preview the series against the Los Angeles Angels and our home opener versus Detroit Tigers. If you're finding this podcast from the link on Twitter, please like the tweet, reply, and retweet it. Or does it act as a reminder for you to check it out on your favorite podcast provider? Why not reply and tweet a shout out to where you're listening from? The same for Facebook. I'd appreciate it if you leave a reaction and share the post. Are you clicking on the link? Or do you go to your favorite podcast provider? Comment with where you're listening from. The Buzzsprout link that I post on Tweet does have links to the podcast providers, so don't be afraid to click the link. Of course, you can go to your favorite podcast provider, now including Google Podcast. If you've been listening through a podcast provider, why not consider subscribing to the podcast? It doesn't cost anything, but it really helps the podcast a great deal. Again, all these things don't cost you anything except a fraction of your time, but it helps bring awareness to the podcast, and it really would mean the world of difference to me. I'm just starting out, and every little bit helps. As always, I've been your humble host, Jerry Schwinnard, and you've been listening to Blue Jays vs. Them. Once again, I want to thank you for spending your time with me. Join me next Thursday and every Thursday of the regular season. This episode went a little bit longer than usual, so tell you what, leave a hashtag saying Blue Jays 23 if you stayed to the end. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of your loved ones. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and let's go Blue Jays, let's go. Bye for now.